ready. Okay. So first we will start with the sales and the collection process. See if I can find my clicker. Sorry, I have to find my clicker. Just give me a second here. So the accounting for the sales and collections, after you take the Accounting 100 and 101 class, it should be fairly straightforward. On the journal entries, it looks like this. When you sell something, right, and you book it as account receivable because it's a promissory note from your customer to pay you, right? This, I already received the goods, right? I am obligated to pay you. So here it is that the account receivable, we log it down as $1,350.54. And the nature of a journal entry, like we see here, is that we know a change in $1,350 may involve multiple accounts. And in this case, the account receivable of $1,350, right, is broken down into sales tax payable, and the actual revenue that's booked is over here, the sales at the $1,250.50. Okay, and then you may have some notes, okay, written in here. And as you can see here on the other side, right, we have over here, we booked cash and sales tax payable and sales. That's another form of sales that in this case, the sales is conducted through a cash payment instead of a promissory note. Okay, and over here, we booked the cost of goods sold in $750.30, and we deduct the inventory over here to $750.30. So this is the process that we take things out of the inventory, right? And then we put the account, the cost of goods sold account, to show that, okay, the cost of this item is 750 cents. Okay, so over here you can see a lot of payments, okay, a lot of collections or sales are logging it down through the journal entries. So the basic accounting activities when it comes to sales and collection, right, for most of us is quite easily understandable is at this point, right? We sell something, we book it, and how many accounts are affected, it's usually shown through the journal entry. So these activities usually involved in the what we call the revenue generation, okay, and the cash collection process. Okay, so every business have a different way conducting its own business. Every business a different product, every business a different service, every business considered how revenue is generated is different. Every business may have a different way to cutting how much sales discount should be given, or how much out of the sales should be awarded to a particular salesperson. Okay, so when we are looking at any particular business, we have to start thinking about how does this business generate revenue? How do they do business? Okay, so the first thing usually start with this. We try to understand their product and services. So let's take a look at example. Let's say a science store here. And this example is also available in the textbook. So we're looking at this science shop. It's called the Sunset Graphic Design. And their product mainly involved in design, graphics, and sell signs and banners or lettering of vinyl graphic for vehicle and boats. I don't know, have you guys seen this? The big sticker you can put it on the bus, right? Or put it on the side of the car, right? And sometimes they are in the form of a large magnet. You can just stick it down and take it down to change to another advertisement on the side of the car. Okay, maybe sometimes science store you also carries like corporate promotional items like T-shirts with the corporate logo printed, okay, or some interesting logo or interesting statement that printed here, like right now you guys know the things like a MAGA hat, MAGA T-shirts. They're probably one of the biggest selling item here. It's quite interesting that a lot of those goods, those MAGA hat and T-shirts, are actually made in China. That's interesting. That even though that the whole thing about them is anti-China, but the stuff are still made in China. Okay, so they may also have like silk screened T-shirts and embroidered here, among other promotional items. So you see that when you look at the product, you get a feeling, oh, okay, so what kind of business they are in, right? But you still have to venture a bit deeper. Okay, how do they interact with their customers or interact within the store among other salesperson in order to facilitate sales? That's different from business to business. So that gets into the point. Okay, we start to describe the sales process for this business, and take this sunset graphic example. Say their process starts like this. When someone walks into the store, the salesperson will prepare a quote that carefully describes the product and service to be provided to the customer. Like, for example, I want to get something printed at San Francisco State University T-shirt, the accounting department. I'm very proud. So I want to get a T-shirt like that. So I walk into the science store and I tell, I want 200 large white T-shirts and with a logo designed by you guys, right? And basically include the San Francisco State University logo and the text accounting department on the upper right corner. And I want 200 large, 200 medium, and I want it to be pure cotton, right? And I don't want those cheap polyester T-shirts. So when you give out these type of requirements, and the business will fulfill that with a quote. Okay, how about $500? How does that sound? Oh, $300. How does that sound? And the customer may go, oh, okay, that's the price I'm going to pay. All right, and then what the business do? And in this case, right, even though their sales item is a T-shirt, but we know there are some processes need to be facilitated in order to sell this T-shirt, right? This is a job per se, right? The company need to provide the T-shirt to the specification. Okay, the customer wants pure cotton T-shirt, X amount in large, X amount in medium, and not only that, they want some logo printed or stitched onto that T-shirt. So that makes us to go to the further step. The customer place the order for all or part of the quoted product and service, and then the sunset graphic will order the product not in inventory from their supplier. And this is something that outside the sales process, because now we're talking about they do not have the item, so they have to order something in the inventory, which we'll cover in the next chapter. And then they will apply the graphics. And once the graphic is applied, they will deliver the product to the customer. At this point, Sunset bills the customer and collects payment, and that's done. This business process is concluded, right? The goods are delivered, and we bill the customer and collects payment. Now the accounting cycle are complete. Okay? So for this, that the most accounting students understand, right? When we can recognize the revenue is the time when liability changes hands, when the responsibility of the product changes from one party to another. In this case, the responsibility changes hand at this point. Sunset delivered the product to the customer. So when the delivery happened, right? Okay, the responsibility of that product, of the goods and service has changed hand, right? So at this point, even though Sunset have not gotten the cash, they can recognize the revenue already. At this point, right, Sunset has the obligation, no, the customer has the obligation to pay sunset, because now this is the customer's liability, right? The goods have already delivered, right? So no matter with what kind of business, you go through this type of process to understand how their business cycle is, how a sales is done, right? But when you try to describe things that in the verbal form or in the textual form, right, it's usually difficult to understand, or you have to read through this whole thing. So in business world, this is what usually done. We prepare something called the Business Process Modeling Notation System, the BPMN system, that we would mark the process in a visual form. And this visual form usually consists some type of graphics, some easy to recognize like shapes. So in this example, in this BPMN form, the circle here, they mark as the starting point of the process, and the end point is over here, another circle. So now we can analyze this process in this form. Okay, provide quote, receive order, prepare the product, apply graphics, deliver order, invoice customer, and receive payments. So that make up the process of how a sales can be fulfilled. What comprise of the sales and the collection accounting cycle. Okay, so the business model can also be categorized into different lanes, because as you can see, when things start involving other department and other party, it can get a little bit complicated. If you were to model everything that has to go through, right, pretty soon that a process is not just a one lane process, right? It has to go to multiple parties, have other departments interact with this sales process. So for that, usually we do it in this way. We call it the swim lane approach, like those Olympic swimming pool. They have different lanes, right? And different parties go through different lanes. And that's the idea. And in this example here, the customer lane is over here. And the sunset graphic lane is over here. So we can see that the sunset provides quote, customer receive quote, and the customer, after certain considerations, place the quote, place the order, and we receive the order and process, prepare the products, apply graphics, deliver order, and they receive order, receive the invoice, okay, and then we pay as the bill. So let's stop here for a second and go back to what we discussed in the first class. So if we look at this process and we think, WWAD, what would accountants do? Let's analyze this process, and from an accounting perspective, can you tell me what are the potential issues here for these process, okay, or point that we have to pay attention to? There are quite a few. Just think from an accountant's perspective. All right, let's find someone to help me here. Okay. Ella, can you help us out? From an accounting perspective, can you see potential issues from their business process that you want to pay a bit more attention to?
Maybe there can be something going, I'm not really sure. Maybe there can be discrepancies between the customer and the sale. Maybe they could do the wrong input. I'm not really sure.
Yes, so what Alice described here is that, okay, if the salesperson need to interact with the system, there may be input error, right? Okay, what else can we see as an accountant? If we take a look at purely on the business process side, right? So let's get another person to help me. Okay, Oscar, can you help us out?
What about not receiving the payment, maybe?
Yes. Okay, so as we can see from this process here, what happens is that we bill the customer. When do we bill the customer? After we have applied the graphics, after we deliver the order over here, right? Okay, so what if the customer don't pay us, or what if the customer cancel the order? Anytime before we invoice the customer, right? We may have already applied the graphics onto the t-shirt, right? And now the t-shirt cannot be sold, right? Because this t-shirt is made for the accounting department, and apparently there are only very few students in San Francisco that are accounting department, right? So that's one thing that we have to consider. Okay, from the accounting perspective, we invoice the customer way too late. We may want the customer to put down a deposit, okay, when they place the order. So we can see that there are potential issues here from the accounting department perspective, right? We have, at this point, prepared the product, right? We have an outlay of resources, right? We have to order the t-shirt if we don't have it. We have to order the parts. We have to input the labor, right? And all these resources may not be recoupable if the customer cancel the order at certain point, right? Or, okay, the customer just did not pay, right? So looking at this, we may want to think about it. Oh, this process from the accounting perspective may be flawed, right? Maybe we can make certain improvements on the process, right? And from this another point of view that we can see here, customer receive quote, and after a certain amount of time, they place order, right? So you may consider how long this quote is valid for, right? Are they valid for a year? It may not make sense because the price of the t-shirt may change, right? Okay. We don't know whether it change up or down, right? But the situation may change, right? So looking at this type of business modeling, give the accountants a chance to look at the system or the potential system. So what things we have to get in there, right? To control the system's flow, right? And to make certain changes, right? So therefore, like Ella's perspective, we may need some controls to see that there's no error in terms of input. Okay, we may need additional process to collect a deposit, right? We may need additional input field to make sure that this quote is only good for X period of time, right? Or the quotes are made only for this customer and this customer only, or the quotes have a percentage that's supposed to go to the salesperson. So you see, even though when we are dealing with a fairly simple product, a science shop, right? How this company does business, there are a lot of points, entry points that potential improvements can be made upon, right? Either from a management perspective or from an accounting information systems perspective. Okay, so sometimes we also have what we call exceptions in the process. And these exceptions, earlier we already discussed, like for example, if the product is not available, right? And then its exceptions marked with a diamond, that means a decision point, okay? That gives us a decision to go yes or no, right? Okay, so if yes, have in inventory, we'll apply the graphics, and the no will go to purchasing. And then something like here, right? We can also further improve the process. Okay, so we find, okay, there is a product here, but before applying the graphics, right, something really important for us to know, because after applying the graphics, well, these t-shirts are considered, not sellable to other customers, right? So do we want to print a sample to the customer for approval, right? And is this the perfect point before the applied graphics that to collect that deposit, or even earlier when they place the order, right, to put down that deposit? So when things are in this type of modeling format, it's a lot easier, right, for us to tell what is the flow of the business, how the process starts from A to Z, and how can we add or improve on these things. Okay, so modeling this allow us to use the keyword here to illustrate the process in diagrams. Okay, instead of use verbal or textual descriptions. You see, if you were to describe these things verbally, right, or to write everything down, it can become quite confusing, right? The worst is probably verbal way that say, oh, we do this first, then we do that, then we do that, and we do that, right? And in situations like that, it's very, very difficult to pin down what exactly is the business issue, and then it's difficult to make concrete improvement on what we've been dealing with. Remember when we talked about AIS last week, right? So we want to look at the business objectives and management directives. Okay, so this, for example, if we want to implement a sales system for this teacher shop, say that originally they are just manual system, right? With manual quotes issued and manual way to lock down how many teachers need to be done, right? If we are going to design a digital system, an accounting information system, right, for them to be available on internet or using app to order this, and these are the things that we have to do, right, to model it and to figure out the process that would take, okay, for this company to fulfill their sales cycle, right? And this, then we can consider it a sales-oriented AIS that will track the sales of a product, right? Maybe all the way down to the collection of the product, right? So a lot of times that when we most students or most accounting professionals thinking about AIS, they have a very, very limited peripheral view of accounting information system. Most people think accounting information system is just, okay, Excel, Peachtree, right? That will take down accounting transactions or help us do the tax, do the payroll in a certain way. But actually, the accounting information system, like we learned so far, is much broader, right? Okay, in what we see so far, we just got into the type of accounting information system that could be done for sales processes, right? So everything you see here, okay, let's say receive order, check product availability, it can be done through an AIS, or over here, purchasing the t-shirt, right? That can be done through AIS as well, right? Like delivering the order to invoice the customer, that can be done through AIS as well, okay? So you may not need an AIS that to encompass the whole process. A lot of times that customer, the customer for an AIS product can focus on one specific area only. Like for example, that one particular AIS may only focus on the delivering, right? The efficiency of delivering, or the how to map the delivery, or how to order the delivery to make sure that the delivery is on a very efficient, path. So I just speak of delivery. I just got my Amazon delivery just right outside the door. They just put outside and took a picture, right? So as you can see here, that is very important, because the moment that they take the picture, they deliver to your door and take a picture, that's the time Amazon can recognize that revenue, because they show that, okay, the goods is in your front door, has left the hand of our delivery person. We no longer hold that responsibility anymore. And now we recognize the revenue, right? And usually that's the time that your credit card will release that payment to Amazon instead of just putting a hold, okay, on the product, right? So that's quite interesting if you think about the sales or collection process, not just through a traditional bookkeeping point of way, just for what we see in the first slide. That's the traditional bookkeeping look of the sales and collection cycle. But when you start looking at the modeling and AIS perspective, right? You can notice that there are many potential ways we can improve upon, right, this whole process. Okay, so what happens next is we have to consider when we move from the process to system, we have to consider what we call something called business rule. Right? A business rule, it deals with how business is done. Okay, it helps the business to ensure that the information system operate in a consistent and effective manner to achieve the organizational objective. So they implement control activities such as the approval, the authorizations, verifications, or review the operating performance, or provide security of asset or segregation of duties. So by looking at this, you mean, and it's a very vague what we're talking about here. So earlier we talked about, right? For example, a deposit must be put down at a certain point, right? Or the invoice is sent, okay, after the product has delivered, okay. Or we said, okay, if before we apply the graphics, the customer must approve the go-ahead of the design and the order, right? So these are what we call how business is done, right? And that's the quote-unquote the business rule. So to enable business rule, like in Sunset's sales department, we know that looking at the graphic, we know what is the time, okay, when approval need to happen, or certain things that the rule of the business, okay, like for example, there must be 10 days before, okay, the quote expires, right? So those are what we call the business rule. How a company does its own business. Okay, so when we speak of this business rules, it usually when we think about the business rules is, okay, the management say this, or you have to learn from it by your job training. Okay, so if an employee say is ill trained, right, doesn't understand the business rules, a mistake can happen. Oh, they may allow customer too big of a discount, or allow them to order items that's not available, or allow certain graphics to be applied on the wrong item, things like that. So when we're looking about this, it's then with the accounting information system, we can enhance the process with the built-in rules in the accounting information system. So, for example, if the accounting information is going to issue a work order within Sunset Graphic to apply the graphics onto the t-shirt or onto the vinyl, right? Okay, and the system may be able to issue a warning, right? Oh, this need to, we need to obtain the customer approval for the next process. Okay, so that's how we said the business rules are done, right? And usually what we used to do is exactly what you see here. We use the BPM and activity diagram to identify the important quote-unquote business events, right? And from these events, we can define the constraints on them, what people, employees can do, or what information should be available, should not be available, or is available, is not available, right? Or what the information system should do. So let's think about the business rule as an example. Let's take the car dealership as an example. So I believe that most of you have shopped a used car in a car dealership, right? I know, one time or another. So you probably notice one thing that when you start talking to a salesperson, right? You engage that salesperson a little bit, the salesperson try to sell you some used cars. And if you try to talk to another salesperson, right? Another salesperson will usually tell you, no. You have to work with him. You have to work with the salesperson you were talking to, right? Why is that? Let's think about why is that. Okay, let's see. Lee, Detroit? Yeah. What do you think that is? Why you cannot work with another salesperson in the car dealership?
Because basically what that person were telling you is going to be the same thing as the another person's gonna tell you. So I think they have like the same mindset of selling, and they're selling basically the same product.
That can be one, but more importantly, from the business or accounting perspective, is do they share the commission? Right. So if you engage with one salesperson, right, and that salesperson start helping you, if the sales is fulfilled, the sale is completed, that salesman deserve a commission on that sales, right? But what if I talk to this salesperson and I talk to that salesperson, I talk to that salesperson, right? What happened to that commission, right? Are they going to share that commission? If that commission going to be shared, by what structure the commission is going to be shared, right? Equally, or 60-40, or depending on how much time. So it gets really, really complicated if you think about it. So most of the car dealership, they implement a control, a business rule, right? One sales can only be dealt with by one salesperson, right? It must identify who that salesperson is, right? If there's no control like this, you will see that the car dealership, the salesperson will probably have a fight behind the garage, right? This is mine, right? So that's yet another example of business rules. And because what we consider is the important, quote unquote, how the business is done, right? Without these business rules, right, the business can be quite chaotic, right? We don't know what's supposed to happen, right? This car salesperson or car dealership is usually worked out this way. Okay, supposedly another manager or another management came in, they think that this is a bad practice, right? It encourage employee infighting, because a lot of times when you call the car dealership, what happens is there are bullying among salespersons, right? What happens is that if they want to, let's say, bully a particular salesperson, right, they direct the call away from that salesperson so that salesperson don't get calls, right? Or they try to take away the customer that's walking in, do not direct customer to a particular salesperson, right? Or the customer, when the salesperson get a call, okay, I was talking to Johnny was helping me to get that car. Oh, Johnny is not available, right? Okay, there are many chances like this, that in a car dealership that the employee just sabotage each other. And so it gave the car dealership a bad name, how the dealership works, because the salesperson is like snake oil salesman, right? They try to always corner you, right? Try to get the deal, they want the deal this time because the next time you walk in, you may work with the other salesperson, all this and that. So if a manager want to change this business rule, we want a collegial environment. We don't want the dealership to have a bad name like this. So they may want to modify their business rule to have an accounting information system to allow share of the sales, shares of the commission, and find a way to logically allocate the bonus to people that work on a particular deal, right? Or allowing the salesperson to choose a partner. Okay, I'm gonna partner up with you to do every car sales that we that come in. If you're too busy, you can direct to me. If I'm too busy, I'm direct to you. So that can be a system too. And this type of system, they all can be implemented into accounting information system. Okay, so how that is done is usually from this: a detailed description, analyzing the process. Like for example, provide quote or receive order. Right? What are the intention? Okay, what are the partner authority or actions need to be taken for these? What are the access control, okay, to allow a authority over this, right? For example, if you want to grant a certain percentage of discount, right? Let's say 15% discount, it's available to a salesperson, but if you want to go over 15%, and you may need a manager with a higher level authority to do that, or to change an order, you may have a manager to, okay, to enter the system with a higher level, okay, of authority level in order to do that. There may be application controls to catch errors, right? So every process in these, the BPMA, the model, can be implemented in the form of a detailed business rule written like this. Okay, so this together will give us the rule set with the intention, actions, access controls, and application control, which will provide the necessary rule set, allow the accountants to see where AIS would play, okay, in the entire business process. So this just happened today. No, I just saw this news when in the morning I got up. So Uber Eats customer, some guy just ordered Uber Eats for $270 worth of food, right? And okay, the customer, if you run the customer, you start preparing the food, right? Because you have to make sure the food is ready by X amount of the time, or otherwise you will get penalized or whatnot. And this customer, right, canceled the entire $270 worth of order before it was delivered. So if you own the business, what do you think? Let's get someone to help us. Okay, Joshua Gomez. No, what do you think? If you're the business, what do you think? What you gonna do?
I don't know. It really depends on the policy through Uber Eats, but I would continue making it. I would try to collect the money.
You try to collect money from whom?
From the customer who placed the order. I think there's some rules or regulation to where you can't cancel within a certain time.
Okay, so you see, this is almost a perfect example to illustrate how business has changed, right? And as an accountant, we have to do things differently. So when you're dealing with Uber Eats, as a customer, you order from Uber Eats, who do you pay? Who do you pay? You pay Uber, right? You don't pay the restaurant, right? So the liability, right? The obligation and liability is between you and Uber. And yet in the same time, right, if you're a restaurant, you're dealing with Uber, right? Now the Uber is actually the person going to pay you, right? Not the customer directly, right? So it's not like you deliver food to the customer actually pay the restaurant. No, it's not like that. The customer pay Uber, Uber pays the restaurant, right? So the consideration of obligations and liability is somehow changing, right? Because there's a third party in there, right? And this third party actually collects the payment and fulfill the sales process. So let's consider this, right? So we understand the concept that if the food is not delivered yet, just like the product is not delivered yet, right? It's considered by the restaurant or by the vendor is what? Unearned revenue, right? It's not delivered yet, right? We have the obligation or the responsibility has changed hand yet. So we cannot recognize that revenue. It is still unearned until the moment that we deliver either the product or services. That part we understand, right? So in this case, right, just like you walk into a restaurant, if the food has not arrived on your table, you have not consumed the food, you haven't really benefited from what you order, you can walk out, right? Because at that point, you can cancel the order. No, I don't want it. I haven't get it. That's it. No, you have no obligation to pay. Same thing as here. The customer changed their mind, right? even though it's already made, but the time from it's being made and then to actually deliver to the door, it's much longer in this case, right? And because the customer just sit in front of the cell phone, right? They don't have that shame, right? Consideration. If you sit in a restaurant, you order a bunch of food, and you just walk out. It's like, oh no, everybody's looking at me. You don't have that with the Uber order. You just sit in the home, get protected by your door, and right. So you don't feel that impact. So what? I haven't get out, just cancel it. But from the restaurant's perspective, it's $270, right, out of revenue that they sacrifice, right? But even though that if you really look at it from restaurant side, it's not $270, it's probably their cost, like probably half of it, right? But it's still, they are unable to collect that. But in this situation, it's different, right? Because when you place the order to Uber Eats, right, and Uber Eats place that order to that restaurant, right? Okay. So when Uber Eats place that order, how do we define the liability and obligations? That changes. So in this case, it's quite interesting that even though the customer ordered the food and canceled it, right, at the end, the restaurant are able to collect payments from Uber, right? Because if Uber do not pay the restaurant can say, there's no guarantee that the food will be get, right? Because when the food get into Uber's hand, right, the responsibility of protecting that food changes hand, right, from the restaurant to the Uber drivers. Uber now has a responsibility to deliver the food, to protect the food, right? But then restaurant, a lot of times they say, no, I don't want, this is too much risk. If you want me to hand my food over to Uber, right, and then I need a promise to pay at a much earlier stage. So in this case, quite interesting that indeed the restaurants were able to collect the entire $270 order from Uber Eats, right? And then the customer didn't pay, the restaurant recouped $270 and $270 out of Uber's pocket, right? Is that fair? How do you think? Do you think fair? Raise your hand. Is that fair? Anybody think this setup is fair? Or how do you think it's not fair? Okay, you didn't raise hand, so I think you consider not fair. Let me find someone. Lan? Lan, what do you think is not fair?
Because Uber, they should not take the full responsibility. Because they only like delivery, but even like sometimes it's I think part of the responsibility should be the restaurant and part should be the Uber, but sometimes it's very difficult to argue like which one should take the responsibility during the transportation.
Yes, but in this case, it's not just the transportation, right? It's just the customer changes his mind, right? Between the time that is ordered and to the time that's to the door. So a lot of times, like some modification to this process can be there. Like by certain time, right? You can cancel the order. After a certain time, you can't. But what's that certain time? Does the restaurant have to say, oh, the food is done, so you cannot cancel the order anymore, right? So there are a lot of finesse needs to be here, right? And that's usually when accountants come into play, right? By accounting rule, when an order can be recognized, when a revenue can be recognized, when the liability or the responsibility of the goods and services change hands, right? And that's when usually accountants come into play, right? Because if this thing will drag all the way down to the court, right? The way they are going to argue is indeed this: the definition of liability or definition of revenue. When can you charge the customer? Why do you think that responsibility have changed hands, right? So, and if you look at things like this, there's no straight answer. No, right? It's probably case by case. but it highlights the importance of business rules, right? And highlight how these rules should be looked at or perhaps implemented from an accounting perspective, right? So if you just design a simple order system, order food, right, deliver food, right, then potentially you are missing out of the things like this, unimplemented, what to do with this type of exceptions, right? Okay, so it's very important to know that the business rule now here, just like we said in the first class, how we conduct business has really changed. Right? In this case, it's there's a third party, right, come in play. That we, as a restaurateur, the customer, we don't even interact with each other anymore. There's a third party in there. So if there's a third party in there, and on top of that, there is the delivery service in between, right? The definitions of the responsibility of goods and service really changes, right? So the business rules need to reflect this changing nature of how things are done. Okay. So to do that, not only we use the BPMA, the process notation system, we also implement something we call the UML diagram. The UML diagram is a simplified version of the ERD diagram. So remember the ERD diagram, we have entity and the attributes of the entity, right? And also the relationship to the entity, all in one diagram. But in UML diagram is much simplified. We only look at the entities and their relations. We do not need to explicitly identify what attributes are inside that entity, okay, or what are the identifying attributes. So it focuses on the entities and the relationship. The purpose of the UML diagram is to create a blueprint, okay, for the development of the business, right? Like for example, if we take a look at the Sunset Graphics as an example, we already know there are several entities need to be there, right? Like for example, the order, right? Okay, the product database, product table, right? There are customers, so there are customer table. And since we are preparing quotes, perhaps that quotes need to be somewhere in the system, so we need a table to track the quotes. So already we can identify several attributes, several entities inside our system. What do we need to keep track of? So usually we do that is through something we call the REA framework. It tracks the resources, events, and agents, right, in an approach that describe the business process. The UML diagram in its entirety, it actually looks like this, right? So you see, these are the entities that we see. The customer will place quotes, right? And the quotes will check if we have something in the product, right? And then if something is not in the inventory, we will work with our Sunset partner to fulfill that order, okay, to fulfill the quote. So when you're looking at this, see here that there are entities, and here we track the entity relationship, okay? And notice that little numbers here. Are you able to see on your side? There are little numbers on this quote over here. Is that clear to you guys? Is it too fuzzy?
It's too fuzzy for me to see.
Okay, let me pull it up. See how can I help this. Okay, let's see if I can blow it up. All right, give me a few seconds here. Let me make this bigger so you can see. So are you guys able to see this better now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. So this is what we mean, the little numbers here. It identifies the relationship. Okay. These are what we call the cardinality rule between entities. Okay, 110 star, and the quote here 110 star, and this 1 star 0 star. Right. So I understand this looks extremely confusing right now. Right. And to understand how to read a UML diagram is the part that it's very important to an accounting students, because you see the business rules are actually imbued in these graphics here that tells us how the business are done, how data, how entities should interact with each other. So let's go back to our slides and show you what we are talking about here. So reading the UML diagram, and I want you to pay attention to this part because this is usually the quite different defining point of a good accounting professional and a bad accounting professional, because a good accounting professional should be able to understand how to read the UML diagram effectively. And a lot of times you place a UML diagram in an actual business, if you see the accounting professional not able to read it, that accounting professional usually just excluded away from the project. No, we can't work with this person. Don't even know how to work the UML diagram, right? And the ability to read it is very important for your future, and also very important for your final exam. How to interpret the business rule from the UML diagram is going to be on the exam. I guarantee it, right? You will see more than one questions on interpreting the UML diagram. So are you able to see this now? The numbers, I make it a little bit bigger. Are you able to see it? Okay, so you see there's a relationship between sales and customer that we read this 1, 1, and 0 star over here, right? And how to read that relationship, what we use is what I like to call the Monopoly method. Have you guys ever played the Monopoly? The board game Monopoly? That you roll the dice and you move your little pieces go like on that Monopoly map. So if your avatar, your piece is on, let's say, Washington Boulevard, and you can look at next one. Oh, next one is jail. Wow, I better not roll 1, right? So you're like roll harder. So make sure that you don't roll 1 to go into jail, things like that, right? So think like that when you're looking at the UML diagram. Over here, the customer and sales, right? So imagine this. If you are rolling your Monopoly piece and your little avatar ends up on customer, okay? And how you look at this is by constructing a sentence, right? Okay, follow me here. If I'm on customer, I'm looking at sales. I'm gonna say for every sales, okay, there can be one and only one customer. Right? Okay, so what does that mean? For every sales, there can be one and only one customer. That means you will not have a sales that are shared by 2 customers. Right? For every sales, that can be only one and only one customer. Right? But if you stand on the sales side and looking at customer, Let's try to make that sentence again. For every customer, there can be 0 or many. Star means many orders, right? What does that mean, right? So some customer may have never ordered any item yet, so 0, right? To many items or to many sales, right? So that means the customer can have not just one order, can have many orders in the customers, right? The customer can place 0 or many, right? Sales. So let's try that again. So if you are standing on customer looking at sales, how do you make that sentence? For every sales, right, there can be only one and only one customer, right? On the other hand, if you're standing on sales looking at the customer, you will make that sentence for every customer, there is 0 or many sales, right? Okay, that's the basics of how to read the relationship using what we call the mapping method, right? This is extremely important because it's not explained in the textbook, right? Usually, people have the biggest problem explaining the UML diagram, just looking at the numbers. What is that, right? And a relationship like this, you can always look at both sides, either from the customer side or from the sales side. Okay, so that's one part of looking at the relationship. The second part is finding the keys. Okay, so on one hand, when you're looking at sales, right, from the customer perspective, right? Okay, so we see standing on customer, we say for every sales, there's only one and only one customer, right? So we know that right, the share is not the order is not shared, but from the other side, right, we're standing sales and looking at customer. For every customer, right, there'll be 0 or many, right, sales, right? So imagine this. So if you were to build a sales table here, okay, we understand that the customer may place 0 or many orders or complete many sales, right? So then we need to track which sales belong to who, right? Oh, this sales belong to customer 111, this sales belongs to customer 112, this sales belongs to customer 113. Yet in the same time, we know that the sales are not shared among customers. So if we were to find how keys are implemented, what we do is we use the arrow method. We post towards the start and away from 1, which means the primary key of customer, let's say customer 111, customer 112, customer 113, okay, are a foreign key in the sales table. Why? So we can identify which cell belong to what customer. Or otherwise it would be a mess. We're unable to find out, the sales number A1, who ordered it? We don't know. Because how we know it is from the foreign key reference, so we can know the information of the customer, like we discussed last week from the relational database. Okay, so that's how you read a UML diagram. So let's take a few more over here. Okay, I know you guys can't see it clearly, right? So let's see if I can make some improvements over here to make them bigger. Let me see. Big. Are you guys able to see it now? The numbers better now? Okay, let me just make it even bigger. Okay, raise your hand if you can see it. Okay, so let's take a look at this relationship between Sunset Partner and the quotes. So you see there's a 1, 1, and 0 start over here. So let's try to stand, let's say if our piece is on sunset customer and looking at quotes. And how do we make that sentence? Okay, we are standing on sunset customer looking at quotes. So the sentence we make is for every quote. Okay, there can be one and only one sunset partner, right, to fulfill that quote. So that means when we prepare a quote, right, we are only to work with one sunset partner, not many, right? We are not going to share this quote or share a particular order, right, among many sunset partners. No, we're only working with one company when we're dealing with the order. And from this customer perspective, looking at quotes, if we are standing from the customer's perspective, looking at quotes, how do we do that? How do you say that? For every quote, there can be one and only one customer, right? So that means what? If we prepare a quote for this customer, this quote is never going to be reused, right? You can't share this quote to another customer and the customer say, oh man, I want the same thing. Can you give me the same quote? No, right? The quote has to be remade, right? But if we're standing on quote, looking at the customer over here, then what sentence do we make? For every customer, right? There can be 0 to many quotes, right? So we may provide no quotes to the customer yet, right? They just ordered it. Or we can perhaps revise the quote, right? For the customer. Okay, that's the first quote, second quote, third quote, things like that. Okay, how about between products and quotes here? Now this is a little bit different. You see there are stars and starts on both sides. Okay, so these are what we call, again, many-to-many relationship, right? Let's think, what is many-to-many relationship based on what we discussed last week, right? So for example, in a quote, you may have multiple products within the quote, right? Right, for example, you prepare a quote for a customer, you may have t-shirts, may have lapel pins, may have like what, vinyl, may have banners. There are many products inside the quote. But yet in the same time for a particular product, like say banner, the banner can be on quote 1, quote 2, quote 3, for many quotes there. So if you want to identify a particular quote for a particular product, right, it's very difficult using this system. It's no way to do that. Because let's say I want to find t-shirts. Well, t-shirts in many quotes, which quotes are you talking about? So in relationship like this, there is what kind of table between them? The association table between them, right? Okay, so that's what we see many-to-many relationship, okay, in a UML diagram. When they are stars on either side of the item, we know that's a many-to-many relationship. Let's try to read this though. So if I'm standing on quote, looking at product over here, and how do we make that sentence? For every product, okay, there can be 0 to many quotes, right? What does that mean? What does that mean? For every product, there can be 0 to many quotes. For some quotes, right? You look at it, you don't need to include every product on the quote, right? Sometimes a product, like for example, a t-shirt can never be sold or never be quoted because that product just bad. So we never use that product in any quote, okay? But on the other hand, okay, so if we standing on product looking at quotes, how do you define the relationship? For every quote, there is one or many product. Why? You will not never prepare a quote with nothing in it, right? Well, here's a quote with no product in it. It doesn't make sense at all, right? So when you prepare a quote, that must be at least one product, right? Or many product, right? That's the business rule when preparing a quote. So for example, if you were to create, let's say, a bundle sales rule, do you guys know those bundle sales? Buy one, get one 50% off. You see that in the Momo all the time, right? That the Vans shoes, they usually do that. Buy one pair at the full price, the second pair 50% off, things like that, right? So a quote like that or a sales like that, they require a bundle sales, right? So this one over here you see may become two. Why? Because the system will require, right, that when you ordered, it's at least two or many, right? So that's how these relationship 1, 2, 3 work. And when you are practicing yourself, you will be able to see it's on the slides that I have actually this the relationship on the slides for you. Okay, so the tip here, use the, I said right, the monopoly method to find out the relationship and construct a sentence for every whatever there is, whatever. What you use is the number closest to you to describe the relationship. When you are standing on customer, you look at quotes. For every quote, there's this relationship. Okay? This is important, right? So these are the rules. Right? You can take a look at yourself in your own time. Okay, let's take a look at this here, the relationship between quotes and order. Let me make another view. So you need like 5-10 seconds. Let me make it the exploded view. All right. Okay. All right. Put my camera in here. For a sec. Okay, no, that's not good. Let's move this away. All right, so let's focus on this graph here. Did you guys see the relationship number 4 over here? Between quotes and order?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let's try to do this exercise. We are standing on order, looking at quotes. And how do we define the relationship? Standing on order, looking at quotes. So we make that sentence for every quote. There's 0 to many order. What does that mean? Well, you prepare a quote, right? For every quote, there can be result in the 0 to many order. Right? You prepare the quote. The customer may not like it, so you don't have any order for that quote, right? And what does that mean? 0 to many order. That implies the customer can reuse that quote, doesn't it? Right? Oh, you gave me a quote last week, 300 t-shirts for $50, right? Okay, can I reuse that quote again and make more orders? Yeah, in this case, in this business rule, right, as we see in the relationship, it is allowed, right? But can we change that? If this number, instead of 0 to star, we change it to 0 to 1, what would that happen? Right? You take it or leave it, right? You either don't order it, you base this quote, or you order it, right? And then there's no more quotes, right? 0 to 1, you cannot reuse your quote again, right? Okay, so let's take a look at quotes and from order, quotes to order. If we're standing at quote and looking at order, right? So for every order, there's 0 to 1 quotes, right? So that's exactly what I said earlier, right? They implemented take it or leave it rule here, right? I'm not gonna to create another quote, revise on my earlier quote for you. This is the quote. That's it, right? Accept this quote or not. I'm not going to make a revision of the quote because exactly what we're standing here and looking in order is for every quote, right? No, I'm sorry. I'm standing on quote looking at order. So the sentence is for every order, there's 0 or 1 quote, right? Because we are standing on order here, looking at quote, right? Okay, so that's how we define relationship number 4. So during the exam, what we'll see is this. I will ask you to define, choose the right relationship, right? What is the right, correct relationship? And I know that it may be a while for now till, let's say, the final, but it's coming. So make sure you practice this. And there are more. I have listed more examples on the slides that you can practice yourself. Okay, but the rules are the same, right? Just practice it and you can check the relationship based on the information on the slides, right? And you should be able to do it. So, okay, so we started at 1:15 and it's now almost 2:45, right? So 2:40. So let's take a break and let's take a longer one, 42:50. Let's come back 2:50, okay? And we'll move on to the next chapter. 2:50. Mama, sometimes my students still can hear me. I can see the mic. No, the mic is sensitive. I can capture your words. You have to be quieter or don't talk. Yeah. Just say don't talk. Or the worst is don't let. You have to choose. So I cannot talk. How easy? See, it's comfortable first. It's like you see their arm. You're not comfortable. So just cover here. You have to put your meaning inside. So we change it. I don't have this book. Yeah, we did. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, feel like very weird and pushing back a little bit. Like we're so bad. Yeah. Okay. My ear go so small. So even wear this. Then. I'll lose. Okay, let me try this one. This one. Is this one too tight? Huh? I will use this. Yeah, sweet, $330. Because I'm comfortable. You use this, and I use this. Okay. But I don't like the color I want to wear. Oh, I know. I didn't open it big enough. No, this. Yeah, comfortable. I like it actually. One is between here. No, I don't want to move. Huh? Because I use a cable. I like a cable, but I don't mind a cable. Something you can have Bluetooth cable. When I start the class, when I started the class, right? When I started the class, we started again. Oh, I didn't have to play with it. 2 hours. Where is the soda? My soda.
Yes. Some help. Finally. Finally made it.
How is this make it big? When you play third floor, you play third floor. Yeah, I was thinking that it is. How was? I was very single one, but you were kind of doing. We were trying to probably one every 2 weeks. Is that you third floor in gold? I think it's in flat. Yeah. You know what's you know what's really funny about Echo? What? When you copy KJ out. Yeah. But that Kevin is so bad. Funny.
This is the end. No, you can't.
All right, let's come back to class. All right, let's take a look. Is Armando here? Armando back? Okay. Participant. Oh, Armando's here. It's not. Okay. All right, let's come back to class. Right, so is Armando here? Let me see. Oh yeah, I see Armando. All right, Armando's here. Good. GN, is GN here? No.
Don't.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I got you. Okay. Okay. Joshua Hernandez. Okay. Gotcha. Lee Choi is here. Good. 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 I got everyone. All right. So GN is not here. So GM belongs to group 6. So did she communicate with you guys? Group 6? Oh, okay, good. Okay, that's what's supposed to happen. If you can't show up, let your group mate know, because when we go over things like this, now we're going to the next unit for our AIS chapter. If you are not here, it's very difficult to understand what is supposed to be done. So you have to ask your teammates to spot for you. All right, so I promised that I'd give you more time in your group work today. So originally our plan is to go through chapter 7 today, go through 2 chapters, but we can't do that. If we do that, we won't have enough time to cover our AIS project material. So I'm gonna give a lecture on Unit 3, the project 4S, and Unit 4 today, and the remaining time would be devoted to your group work. So before we start with group work, that there's some students have dropped from class. So that what happened is originally we have a 4 to 6 member for each group, and now one group they have only 3 people left because one member dropped from their group. So what we're looking at is that we probably have to break that group apart. So there will be 3 persons from that group. So later you guys can consider among your teammates, are you willing to take one more team member? So if you want someone one more person to help you with your group work, you can tell me after doing group time, so I can assign those 3 students to various group. If nobody communicated with me regarding, let's say, oh, I want to take one new member in, then I would just assign them to different groups. Okay, so if you feel like, oh yeah, we can use one more person, the more the merrier, and let me know later after the break. So okay, so okay, let me get my AirPods in, so I'm not wearing the big headphone. Okay. All right, okay, I can hear you guys good. So the next unit we're going to cover with respect to our AIS project is what we call the Project 4S. Right, the Project 4S, this is designed to enhance the communication for your project. Now, what you have done so far, you have done the project charter, a very short description, right, designed to illustrate the justification and to obtain authority of your project, right? We also listed out the business objective and management directives for your project. Okay, that's what you've done for last class. But then consider this, if you were to communicate your project, tell other people what your project is about, try to describe your project to various members. There are programmers in your project, there are graphic designer in your projects, there will be salesperson on the team, or maybe some other members, right? How do you describe the project to them so everybody can be sort of on the same page, right? The language in the project charter may not be enough because it's too short, right? It's too concise and does not have enough, let's say, detail in it. And the business objective and management directive only allow you to understand a high level goal, but not enough about your project. So indeed, how do we communicate the project to the team member is what we are looking at today. So, let's think about my slide's not moving. Okay, the stakeholder and the AIS project. So let me give you an exploded view of what we're talking about here. Okay, so in a project, it's quite something interesting. Let's say when the customer described to you what they wanted, oh, I want something like this. He said I can sit on it, and there's several things I can climb on, or I can swing in a tree, right? That's how customer describe it. But then what happens when the project leader understood it is perhaps like this. Oh, okay, we have 2 strings and the board is going to hang on it, but they lost the point. Okay, I have to swing back and forth to enjoy it. But then if you see how the engineering decided, oh yeah, let's make it swing. But what happens is that they understand if in order to make it swing, they have to cut the section off, right? But the tree will fall, so they prop it up, right? With the 2 other, big columns here. So that's what usually we call it the over-engineering. This is the project leader want, and let's make it work somehow, right? It still missed the point of how the customer explains it, right? And then if we see how the programmer wrote it is something else, and how the sales executive describe it, maybe yet something else. Oh, sitting on this, it will give you feel so good with the sun shiny behind your back. You feel so comfortable, right? It's different. And how the project was documented, maybe nothing. And how the operations was installed, it didn't even work. But how the customer was billed, is like a roller coaster, right? And then in the end, what the customer really needed is perhaps something simple like this. So this highlights the problem what we are talking about today. A project, depending on the different parties, right? And depending on how people are understood. Oh, my background disappeared. Let me put it back. Okay, here. Okay. It can be very difficult to quickly describe the AIS to various stakeholders. This may be because they have a sorry about that. My scene keep changing. They have a different level of technical knowledge. It may be their level of interest in the project may be different. They may be motivated differently. They may have a different perceived function of how the AIS should work. And the relevancy of how the AIS should be used to their job may differ. So they may understand it completely differently. For example, on this graph, the salesperson, the way they understand the AIS is to build a customer, right? To sell it like something that is very good, right? From the engineer perspective, right, they just want to build something that works, right? And from the help desk or project documentation perspective, they may look at the project very differently. Oh, okay, we don't get any resources on documentations, right? They didn't give us time to work with the engineer. We don't know how to document it. So from various perspectives, a project can be understood quite differently. So imagine this situation if the team, in your AIS development team, that if there's no sort of some kind of common ground, common understanding of what the project should be, right? It can potentially lead to disaster. This is just an interesting way of looking at it. But if you show this to people who work in the project management or software development, they would all laugh because this thing really rings true. Based on my experience, I've seen situations like this so many times, it's not even funny anymore, right? But it's really true. So that gets us to think about it, right? If it's so difficult to communicate, right? And then we get into the situation of really what makes a good AIS. It's so difficult to communicate, to meet all the stakeholder expectation, right? And if you want to design a good AIS, let's think, what is a good AIS then? Right? Some people may say, oh, a good AIS has to be scalable, right? Or if my company grow, the AIS is supposed to grow with it, right? If I want to expand the AIS, I should have the option to do it. Some people may see, oh, okay, not only scalable, it has to be customizable. Documentation is really important. If a AIS is not documented, right, we may not be able to realize how to even scale it or customize it because everything is a spaghetti mess, right? But the most important way to evaluate the AIS is here. Is what we call the perceived ease of use and perceived usability. Okay, these are usually what are the two most important criteria when we're judging a software. And these two are complete different paradigm. And perceived ease of use, this paradigm says a software, an AIS, or any kind of device or software, it has to be easy to use, or otherwise people will not use it. People will not even try to invest time to learn how to use it, right? Okay, and the other different end of the spectrum, they see the perceived usability is the most important. What does that mean? That, this thing must be useful. It must have a lot of function. People need to understand that we can do so much, right, with this software, right, or with this device. And these two paradigms, you can tell there's two very famous companies. They support these opposite paradigm. For Apple, they always stand behind this perceived ease of use. For Steve Jobs, the most important thing of his design or their company's product is always ease of use. It has to be easy, right? If it's not easy, people will not even try to use it. There's no point. So for the longest time for Apple product, you guys probably quite interesting to learn this, that Apple or Steve Jobs wouldn't allow a mouse with more than one button. The traditional Apple mouse only have one button in it. That's it. Just easy, just one button. There's no consideration. Oh, sometimes I have to use the right button, sometimes I have to use the left button. No, just one button. That's how he see it. And he wants everything from Apple to always go this paradigm, easy to use. But on the other end of the spectrum is the perceived usability. You know which company focus on this perceived usability very much? It's Microsoft. Microsoft believe in a paradigm, said if you have enough function built in the software, and people will perceive it to be very useful to their job. And eventually they will learn to use this software. So these two, sometimes they go against each other. Because you see, if you want something easy to be used, it cannot be complicated. You cannot overcomplicate your software with so many functions, so many things they can do, and they will see it, it's so hard to learn. No, I don't want to do it, right? But if something is very, very easy to use, right, it may sacrifice some of the perceived usability. But as you can see here, right, these two items always have the word perceived in it. Why? Because when it comes to ease of use, how easy it is, or how useful a particular software is a perception, right? It's how do you measure a particular software or an AIS is easy to use? It's difficult. You may get different answer from different people. If a person who's never used, let's say, if I ask you how difficult is Excel, you may get very different answer, right? Some people have never used Excel before. They think, oh, very easy. Or some people never try to use the advanced, functionality of Excel, like building the macro or do other advanced functions, calculation in Excel. They think, Excel is easy, just punch number in and then you can make tables, right? People perceive things differently. And same thing as usability. If I ask you how useful is a particular software, or let's say how useful is Microsoft Word, right? If a person never needed to use the Word, they may think, no, it's not useful enough. So the question here is perceived, right? So you're, as an AIS or any kind of software, you have tried to enhance that perception, right? So same thing for my class. Is my class easy? Some people may say it's very easy. Some people say, oh no, it's so hard, so much work, right? And if you ask some same question, is my class useful, right? Although I try very, very hard to make the class useful, but some people may see, no, it's about software, it's about AIS, I want to be an accountant, no, I'll never touch a piece of AIS. Again, it's a perception. So a lot of times when students evaluate professors, right, the professor may think, oh no, that's a flawed way of course evaluation. Students are not qualified to evaluate the professor's work. Some may argue that way, but some may argue this no, because we have to give manage the student's perception, right? If you think that class is too hard, right, then you will not be motivated to learn. It's too hard, I can't do it. Just no matter how hard I try, I can't get there. Then we lost the student, right? If the student perceived to this class to be too complicated, oh, it's useful, we learn so many things, but it's too complicated, it's not easy. Or the students would think that, this is useless. No, the journal entries are useless. No, I don't want to learn, right? Then the students are not learning. So part of our job is very much similar to when it comes to how to evaluate an AIS, is try to manage the perception from the students. So you would think the class is easy enough and useful enough. And yet, in the same time, we understand that not everybody think the same. So it's always an uphill battle to maintain that balance somewhere. So the majority, the bulk of the student can learn something from the class. Right? So that's what I'm trying to do here. Right? Very similar when you think about how to make a good AIS. Right? So these principles, right, we will see here, it doesn't really matter if it's scalable, customizable, documented, or perceived easy, or perceived useful. It requires very good communication between the users and those who implement an AIS, right? We have to tell them what this is about. Like, how good is your AIS? How useful is this? Well, how are you going to tell them, right? So this whole thing started what we call the primer of the project. Right? I guess some of you did the work. I did it before, like to a summer job to paint a house, right? So when you paint the house, right, you know what the first thing you have to do? You have to scrape the paint off and then put on the primer, right? So if you put the primer on, then the paint will stick. If you don't put the primer, no. The same thing. You know, what we're try to give you here is a primer, a baseline of understanding of the project, right? So this is important for stakeholders when, especially when there are multiple projects within an organization in the same time, because so many things are happening. So what is your project about? And it's also very important that to allow the project participant to get into the gear faster, because for any type of software development project, like let's just think for your AIS, you may not have a graphic designer on board, or you may not have the programmer on board from the very beginning. Then people enter and leave the project at different time, depending on when we need them. So if you have, let's say, a new member coming to the project, how do you make sure that can get into the gear faster, can speak the language faster? And that's what we use this project primer for, right? And this last one is probably the most important one. It enables the management to represent the project to a higher level, right? Okay. A lot of times that when we work in an AIS project or any type of software project, the person who represents this project to the higher level is usually the manager. So how does a manager understand your project? Can the manager describe this project effectively? Because if the manager failed to do that, then the upper management level will not comprehend how important your project is, what your project is about, right? So this project primer can serve all these purposes, provides baseline understanding among the team member, allow people to get into the gear faster, and allow the managers to learn about the project and to broadcast it, right? To tell other people about your project. So how do we make that project primer, right? And this is what we call the project 4S, okay? It stands for story, scale, scope, and stuff. That's the main 4S we need to consider. We will go over these 4S one by one. Okay? So first, the story. I think, now what's the story of your business, or the story of your life, the story of why you coming to San Francisco State University, right? When you are asked to give a story, what do you have to do? You have to make it interesting, right? People asking to tell a story, you're just like, one, and the two, and the three, nah, not interesting. You try to tell it in an interesting way to have them engaged, right? So they will listen. There's something interesting about you. Same thing. When you're talking about the story of AIS, you want to provide a background story of the project. What is really happening? So a pen to communicate with the stakeholder with a hook, right? A background telling the justifications, possible impacts, and issues in a much down-to-earth way. Okay, it's not written in business language. Tell them in a matter of fact, very interesting, plain English way, what's this project about? The background story. right? How did it came about, or what the business is facing, right? Okay. Story can be descriptive and should be easy to understand, avoid any technical jargons, and written in plain English. Especially important here, just avoid the technical jargon about it. So anyone, it doesn't matter where they're from, doesn't matter their technical knowledge level, it doesn't matter their education or involvement level, they should understand the story of your project, right? It's a different, you may think, oh, I already sort of write about it in the charter, right? But remember, when in the charter, we are communicating to a upper management level. The language used is very different. It's concise, right? And we don't want to just put things in it to make it engaging or whatnot. No, we not try to do those things. It's very, very short, right? When it comes to management objectives, okay, and the management directives and business objectives, right? We perhaps wrote it down in the bullet point format. It's not in a descriptive story format. So we want to make it interesting, right? So people can learn about it. Like, for example, if you try to tell this story, right? So what's that? Oh yeah, good. You can see the head of 4 very important presidents. So what's the background story of this? You can see, oh, the background actually looking like this. So that's the story you got. Okay? Yeah, no, this is just a way. Okay, looking at the foreground and background. Oh, okay, that's actually there's 4 big giants laying down. That's why you can see their face, right? Okay. So story can sometimes be creative. What you want to other people to know about your project, and can sometimes even illustrate a user's experience. I've seen the story of AIS. They just describe the user. Oh, this user come to our store and did this and did that and did this and did that. They feel frustrated. So therefore, we think that a software is needed, right, to justify the user experience. They may also walk through an employee's day in life, right? Or track an order's life cycle, how an order is created, right? And then how this order was fulfilled, and what's the problem in it, right? So a story can take many, many forms. Okay? It doesn't need to be like very dry business language. Nah, the important thing is make it interesting. So make it engaging for the people to understand, right? The basics, the baseline background of the AIS software, right? So the goal is to make your project matter in the reader's perspective, right? Make it matter to them so they are engaged, right? They understand. Right? The next thing is scale. Scale is the concept that concerns the breadth of the project, right? So if we understand the breadth of the project, the first thing we think is how big it is, right? How big, if we looking at the scale of this software is huge. So if you think that, say, the Obamacare, the healthcare.org, right? So if we could consider the healthcare.org, the first thing we know is, oh, it's huge. Why? Because it potentially allow every American citizen to access healthcare.org and shop different healthcare packages for them. So we know the scale is very big because potentially you have to handle a huge amount of information, right? And many people access the particular website all in the same time, right? So what we do for scale is usually specified through a quantitative measure. For example, how many departments are involved for this AIS software, or how many users will it serve? Right? Earlier we discussed the healthcare.gov, many potential users. How many? Describe in a quantitative term. Or how much data will it process, let's say within a month or day or during a specific time? Let's say if your AIS have to process 1 million orders or versus 10 orders in a day, the scale of it, the development is completely different, right? If you're going to only to cover 10 orders a day, most likely an Excel spreadsheet will do the work, right? You only have 10 orders to track. But if you have, let's say, millions of orders like Amazon, right? Excel wouldn't do the job. You gotta have different components of software to be able to allow many people in the work in the same time. You gotta have a backend database to support all these different users, right? So the scale, when you consider it, right, the most important thing is the larger the scale, the more resources will be needed, right? The tip of thinking about the scale is think a real scale. Do you guys ever seen this? The old school scale like that? Yeah? Have you guys ever seen it? This thing brings up memory, you know. When I was little, you know, my grandma, I always go to the market with my grandma. So my grandma would take me to the morning market, right? And when I was young, you don't buy meat from the supermarket. No, it's not a prepackaged. There's actually a pig hanging there, right? The butcher just cut a meat from that pig, and they put on this scale and weigh it, right? And you pay for it. And when I was little, I never thought much about scale. But as I grow up, right, I noticed one thing about this old school scale. They never wash this tray. All day, the tray is exactly the same. There'll be pig brain putting on this tray here, right? There'll be pig intestine, and then there's a chicken. It's if you think about it, that tray have seen everything. It's disgusting. Yeah, you know, it's like it doesn't surprise me that you know, the disease get created this way because you know this cross contamination and everything. Yeah, but it's old school scale for you. So think about it. If you were to put your entire AIS on a scale, now just you can see. And the pin goes, you see how heavy it is, right? How big your project is. And so that's how you think of the scale. The important thing is I want you to describe the scale through some kind of quantitative measure, right? Either how many people get involved, how many orders will process, right? Or how many users will potentially serve, right? Yeah. How many customers or how many orders, try to describe it in this way, right? That's scale. How about scope? Scope consider the depth of the project, how deep it is, how detailed it is, right? And usually specified through a qualitative description instead of a quantitative term. Right. So for example, what specific business or accounting function will it cover? So let's say earlier we talked about the sales, right, process or sales and collection process. Right. We can see that if we were to look at it in very simple, just to track sales, right, and issue the invoice and collect payment. So it can be this easy, right? But if you look deep enough, like put the whole process under a microscope, then you start to realize, oh, we have to consider about quote. Oh, we have to consider the expiration of quote. Oh, we have to consider how many quotes, right, can the customer get? Or how many are we going to revise the quote? Okay, so that's what we're talking about here, the depth for the project. How deep do you want to go? What's the extent of the system capability in terms of, like, say, accounting input, process, accounting output? How much do you need, right? How much processing do you need? Let's think, right? Let's say an inventory process. The inventory process, the basic of it is just to count inventory, right? But if you were to put everything under a microscope, so how do you collect the inventory count? Do you have a person to count it and manually input the number, or do you have an infrared scanner to scan each item into the inventory, right? Or do you send people to walk around the store, right, to collect those things that are scattered or littered in the aisle, and then connect and then manage the count? So the scope, it deal with this type of things. How deep do you want it to go, right? It is not a saying that you cannot go as deep as you want. It's never necessary, right? The quest is that you are able to complete the scope that you defined at this moment, right? And then finish it. You always find out that, oh, there's more detail to be covered. There's more detail to be covered. But the thing is that you don't need to complete the AIS in one go. You can finish in the next version. Or this version, we are looking at the scope, just have the sales process ready. And the next version or next iteration of the AIS, we will think about the return process, right? Like for example, in earlier version of Amazon Go store, right? The return is not handled at all. There's still people standing in front of the store, right? So if you are going to return the product, right, you have to go through the manual process too, right? So how or when or if the return process will ever be implemented, we don't know, because return is a complicated process, right? Right? We have to evaluate the product, whether it can go back to the shelf or not, or we have to evaluate whether, you know, this return product and we're gonna return in the original payment form, right? Or this return is going to the trash bin directly. We don't know, right? So that's what we mean. If you put your AIS or the process under a microscope, how deep do you need to go, right? Okay, so the principle of scope is that the deeper the scope, the more detail need to be considered. And then the more user or subject area experts need to be involved, right? Because let's say if you want to do an inventory management system and you want to go deep, then you gotta have the inventory department people come to help you, right? You have to interview them. You know, what's the process you go through for inventory count, right? You may need to hire some specialists, some even, you know, outside consultant to find out how a robotic inventory system can be done, or whether it's feasible for you to do a robotic inventory system, right? Okay, so it tends to be more complicated and require more resources if the deeper, oh sorry, the text got cut off on my slides. Okay, the deeper the scope, it tends to be more complicated and also require more resources. All right, so when you think about scope, think indeed like this. Think microscope or telescope. Through scope, one could gain understanding of the depth of the project. That's how you think scope, right? So remember, right? Story, we want to make it interesting, easily readable. Scale, we want to understand the breadth of the project in quantitative terms, any quantitative terms. And with the scope, we want to understand how deep you want to go, right? Set a boundary, right? Tell me, what are you dealing with? Are we just dealing with the sales process, right? Give a short description of what the process you're trying to do with your AIS, right? The next one is stuff. Stuff is fairly simple. It concerns with the non-human resources inventory. Like for example, what's your current system that you are working right now? Oh, we have 10 computers, right? 10 computers on Linux operating system. We have 10 computers on Microsoft, or we have no database, right? Maybe you can consider the current documentations or your business process. Like earlier, last hour, right? We go through the BPMN process to see how the process is analyzed. Do you have that, right? If you don't have that, then the product and service and the business process need to be analyzed, right? In order to have the business rule ready to become an AIS, right? And maybe you have copyright, trademark, patent, or protected material that can be used, or maybe your company already licensed software like SAP. Oh, we already have an active license of SAP, allow 10 users to use the software in the same time. Do you have that? What do you have, right? Current machines that are used, current contracts that firm has, or access to resources, even like stock photo, merchant account in Amazon, cloud storage, or Peachtree accounting software. What do you have right now? That's what the stuff is concerned. So after these 4S, right? The story, the scale, right? The scope, and the stuff, right? It gives the project members a primer, a basic set of understanding, right? Or what this project is about, right? What do we have? How big do we have to be, or how deep is this going, right? So in terms of project, providing a good reference to the stuff, they usually enhance the efficiency of AIS development. So people know, okay, what do we have? What do we need to order, right? What we don't have enough yet, right? Okay, right. So your stuff is, I considered some of the stuff of your AIS project: current system, computer equipment, input output devices, accounting data, customer database, client analyst. These can be the stuff. So for these 4S, right, just consider the story, the scale, the scope, and the stuff. It doesn't need to be perfect the first go around. Nobody is perfect. You say, no, this type of project documentations, right? There's no way you can make it perfect the first time go around. No, right? You're just constantly revising. It's like, okay, we find out we actually have this, and you put in more in the stuff, right? But the structure is there. So when you need to revise, oh, okay, we actually find out that the scale needs to be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, and you revise it, right? But the focus is that the basic set of information, this project primer, it has to be there to help people understand, okay, what the project is about, right? So as someone, like as from an outside party, if I take a look at your project, right, or any other's project, any student's project, if I get my hands on this, therefore S, so I'll have an almost immediate understanding of what they're trying to do, right? It tells me a good story. What's this project where is this project coming from, right? I understand how big it is, right? I understand what they are trying to do, right? And I understand what they have currently, right? And that gives me a very, very good primer or understanding for what I need to go next. Okay, so let's take a break. Okay, let's do 12 minutes. Let's come back 3:45. Is that okay? 3:45. You have to change your clothes. Too hot. Of course hot. Wear thick clothes. You know, Mama, I'm hot. Yes, he did. Do you go out with him? Not anymore. Mama, go out? You wanna go out? He's taking me out. You wanna go out? Okay, Bish. Okay, Bish. Okay, Bish. Okay, Bish. So we can go out. Mama, go out. You wanna go out? You wanna go out? ちょっと待って。やめていい? Anything else? I thought there's something else arrived too. It's two delivery showed up. Where are you? Can you get it?
No, that's very cheap, right? $7. Not good enough. What you have very bad. Come on, yeah.
What you get? You cannot hide it. $5. $5.
Money.
you did programming today?
Okay.
You haven't do programming and you haven't do typing, right?
Okay. Now I did it.
You have to do programming and typing soon.
Okay.
All right, let's come back to class. Right, so next unit, we're going to talk about the project dictionary and a project noun list. Okay, so we have been through 3 project units so far. They are the project charter, right? Described the justification and the authorization of the project, and we went through the MOG pyramid to understand the business objectives and the management directives, system goals. And then we just been through the 4S, try to set a primer of the project, let the stakeholder understand, right, in terms of the story, the scale, and the scope, and the inventory of stuff, what we have. And now we get into the next segment. We try to understand a little bit deeper, right, in terms of building a project dictionary and a noun list. So like we said here, right, we have prepared some general information about the AIS project. And these information are useful in several ways, right? We can serve the external and internal stakeholders' information needs. We can provide a knowledge base for the project members. We can help the management understand and support the project. However, we still know very little about the AIS project itself. And that's what we are going to do from this point on. We start getting to the project the detail, right? What's inside this project. So from this unit onward, we start looking into the AIS and we focus more on the project detail. We start to prepare information that are geared towards the members, inside the people who are inside the project and inside the project only. Okay, so usually what happened with the project information from this point on, okay, as you can feel that more and more detail are involved. After you talk about the stuff, now you start talking about there's some information maybe perhaps should be restricted to authorized personnel only, right? Like for example, if you were to build a, let's say this little device here, do you know that this the AirPod, right? Okay, there's some detail of this information you may not want to share with the people outside the project. For example, you may not even want how people call this device, or who are you going to work, which vendor you're going to work with in order to have this built. You may not want people to know about it, but people inside the project, they should know, right? Or what specific technology you're going to use, right? And what the particular software license, right, you're going to acquire. There are things more and more that are very specific to the project. You may want to protect it so people don't know about it. And for what we know, like Apple, right, has always been very good at this, right? They try to protect their project information. They keep things very close to their chest. And in the old days, people were not able to learn almost about anything about that the new release of the product until the moment that they're released on the platform, on WWDC, the Apple's development forum, things like that, you know. So what we need to know that in the real world, okay, usually the information up until the 4S, right? You can let people know about it. Let the project, the newcomer of the project, learn about the basic set of the information to the point up till the 4S. But beyond the 4S, the information, what we do in the real world is usually shrink wrap it. Okay, so we shrink wrap. You understand the basics of this project, but from this point onward, if you want to know about more detail of the project, you have to sign an NDA, and on the cover of that shrink wrap. So if you sign it, then you can tear it open to read information that beyond that project 4S and start to learn about, like this module we're going to work on is the dictionary of the project. Okay, so before we get onto the project dictionary itself, I want you to start considering the concept of protecting the project information. Earlier, we discussed the Apple's practice when it comes to protect their project information. So this little story is about Apple. So it sounds like this. Not too long ago, in a city not too far away. So what happened is that on April 19, 2010, the Gizmodo, did you guys know Gizmodo? A gadget website. Right? They always try to give some new information about the next cell phone, things like that, right? So they broke a story of the iPhone 4 prototype, that is by paying for the prototype phone that someone had found it in a bar. Literally, what happens is that Apple has this iPhone 4 prototype phone, okay? And the engineer is testing it. And that engineer left that iPhone prototype phone in a bar in Redwood City. That's literally what happened, right? So the people pick it up and they see, oh, what is this? This snazzy. Oh, great, you know? And what happened is that they actually bought that phone and called Apple about it. Hey, yeah, I picked up the phone. You know, it looks like an Apple product, but Apple protect. So what? Oh, just sold it, right? And Gizmodo's editor bought it and released that information, right? Revealed it, and actually it's tracked it in this story here. This is Apple next iPhone, and take a picture, test it, and Apple went berserk. Really, literally went berserk. So they even contacted California police. So the California police raided the home of that Gizmodo editor, Jason Chan, and broke down his door and seized an array of computer and electronic equipments. And Apple was going, all out after this Gizmondo's editor. But he just bought a Chinese knockoff phone according to Apple's customer service. But Apple protected it so well, right? So the question is, why Apple want to protect this so much? What's the motivation? So it's one thing that a video that I want to show you, and is the Steve Jobs' very, very last, public interview. And at that point, you can see that he's already getting very skinny. And at that point, nobody knew what happened, right? Nobody knew that he already got cancer, right? But within 6 months, he passed away. And this is the very last of his public appearance on the public stage. And during this long interview, he talked about this incident. And I want you to look at this video, and I'm glad, it's very nice that I actually fixed the video thing. So now you can look at the video with me and also hear the audio. So let's try to see how Steve Jobs reacted to this whole incident. All right, so let's pull this video up. Oh, where is it? Okay, give me a few seconds. Let me pull it up.
What do you imagine? This has been the past 10 years of bringing back Apple, 10, 12.
Are we gonna cut his hair?
Are you guys able to hear the audio? Okay, good. So we'll continue. Good. Okay, so the whole video, you can see it from my slide, is about 1 hour and 35 minutes long. I only take out a little bit portion to show you what he was talking about, this whole Gizmodo business. And it's quite amazing that this was taken only less than 6 months ago before he passed away. And you can still see his passion, right? When he talk about Apple, when he talk about the ideal of Apple. And this is the very definition that I would call is until my dying day. No, I will not let it slide. No, until his dying day, he still believed that you have to protect that product information, right? You don't want to ruin the surprise, right? When you show the customer the Apple phone, it will be the best Apple iPhone. No one knows about it. No one knows what it can do. So that's the idea behind protecting the project information, right? So when you're looking at the iPhone, there are a lot of information around in my phone that you may not want people to know. In the first beginning of the iPhone, what they were working on, right, is the first touch screen phone, right? So with regards to touch screen phone, there are a lot of things it goes into a touch screen phone. Just take the screen as an example. If you read his biography, there's a wonderful section about how he worked with the company to develop this touch screen phone that just like glass. Some of you guys may know the product. You know the company Corning, the Corning's company. They make plates. You know, they just a company make plates, right? So, but apparently Corning is the best manufacturer out there when it comes to specialized glass, right? So Steve Jobs approached Corning and asked them, I want to make a glass like this. I want to make a durable glass. I want to make a glass that's oleophobic. Oleophobic, that means that if you drop the water on the surface, the water will stay like little ball of water. So it will allow you to slide the screen smoothly. That's called oleophobic, the glass. So he was there in the Corning's boardroom, lecturing on those glass specialists how to make these glass, and those Corning's technicians and engineers, they sit there and they said, you know, yeah, this is our business, but you're Steve Jobs, so we let you talk. But they said, no, let us do our job. And what that glass is called, and how the glass is made, has later revolutionized the cell phone business. And that glass is called Gorilla Glass. Right? So now you have a very specialized term with a very specialized company, right? And you want your project member to know, we are working with something called a Gorilla Glass. It is going to be made by Corning, right? There's a contact in Corning that will work with us, develop this glass, and we're gonna test it out, this and that. So how do you think? As a project member in Apple, how far would you go to protect that information, right? But yet in the same time, the people inside the project, they have to know, right? They have to know, oh, a particular term called Gorilla Glass is going to be used for our project, right? So hold on, let me go back to my slides here. Okay. Okay. So this is the idea of what we think about. You know, when you start talking about information from the 4S onward, you start to consider, the certain project information need to be protected. So discussion here that we want to think about is why project information need to be protected. We go through Jobs' video, right? And he said it passionately, right? Principle like this should not be changed. And I'm really particularly touched by the long pause when the journalist asked him, what do you imagine what Apple's gonna do 5 years down the road? At that point, he already know he's not gonna be there, right? He himself know he only have less than a year left, even though the rest of the world had no idea what's going to happen, right? But he knew. But the very first thing he brought up is this Gizmodo business, because he thinks that protecting the information, the product information, is the thing that he holds true, right, until his dying day. So we know, because sometimes they have trade secret in it. Sometimes it's intellectual property right, okay? And for Apple, Jobs always believed that you should not ruin the surprise, right? And this is one thing is also very important here. You want to avoid undue influence or interferences. A lot of times, if you reveal too much information to people outside the project, the interference may not come from your competitor, may come from within the organization itself. No, this happens a lot in another company called Microsoft. I think some of you understand or have heard how Microsoft operates. You see, Microsoft operates in a very, very different manner than what Steve Jobs described in his video. Microsoft operates like in many committees inside Microsoft. And so before Windows 8 released, right, there's actually 3 versions of Windows 8 run by 3 different teams. Okay, they are trying to compete each other because that's Microsoft's approach. The best team wins, the best product wins. So they have enough money to allow 3 simultaneous development of Microsoft 8. Right? So what happens is that they dig information from other project team. Or what are you guys doing? What you guys doing? And in order to ensure their survival, their team survival, what they did is they interfere with other teams' work to make other teams fail, right? So they can be successful. And this thing has gone so bad. The actual released version of Microsoft 8, the Windows 8 was so bad because that team won out, right? And people just, hated Windows 8. And then within about a year, they dropped this whole idea. The head of Microsoft product actually quit after this Windows 8. And Windows 10 released was actually another simultaneous project at that time. It's called Longhorn, right? That was the actual best. And this is just highlight to you what undue influence from within your corporation can look like, can feel like, right? Somebody is jealous of your success. Somebody do not want to see you become successful. So when they start learn more about your project information, they may exert some interference, right? Use their influence to make you fail, right? So there also may be legal liabilities or contractual obligations. You have to protect those information, right? So if you look at this, right, there's some certain principles or technique to protect the project information. Usually the first principle is the need to know principle. If you don't need to know, I'm not telling you. Combined with what we call the right to know, the Great Wall principle, right? You may need to know as a salesperson, but you have no right to know, right? So I'm not letting you know, okay? And this Great Wall principle is quite often used even within the accounting industry. Let's say a lot of times that in accounting industry is that you have these big four accounting firms. There's so many employees in there, and sometimes your competitor and you may share the same auditor. And again, there's a shady business practice is to talk to your auditor. Say, hey, you are auditing my competitors, right? Okay, if you want my next year project, let me know what they're going on. Let me know what they're doing, right? So even within the same accounting firm, you set up a wall, right, between your team and other team, right, to protect the information. Because see, even though that person works in the same company as you, but that person does not have either the need to know or the right to know, right? Because the information that you are auditing your project, your company, yeah, may be a competitor of another client, right? But so that information has to be protected. Okay, so another one is what we call the Clark-Wilson model or information checkout. This principle allows that say, oh, I check out this piece of information is in my custody now, right? So when this thing happens, that especially in the military project, is that when you check out a piece of software or piece of information, the information that of you check it out, when check it out, is embedded somewhere in the document that you cannot see. Maybe sometimes in a picture, sometimes in a hidden watermark, right? To make sure that, okay, you are the person, check this information out. And when do you put it in, right? Those are the what we call the Clark-Wilson model. And technique to protect the information, like sometimes we use managerial control, setting up policies or guidelines. Sometimes we use NDA or legal avenues. Sometimes we require access control or biometric mechanisms like thumbprint or retina scan to protect those information. So now next is what we talk about, what we're going to build for the project. What we're going to build is what we call a project dictionary or a noun list, right? If when you look at the word dictionary, you start thinking about, oh yeah, it's probably a dictionary for this project, right? So when we talk about this project, we use the same word, the right word, the same vernacular, right? So people, if you use the same language, the right language, you immediately know, oh yeah, you are in the know, quote unquote, right? And people who outside the project, like for example, like earlier we talked about the term Gorilla Glass, right? So people outside the project, they are not supposed to know. So they had no idea what the Gorilla Glass is actually about. So that's what project dictionary is, right? You can start look at it as some kind of noun list, a list of nouns, words that are special, right, to your project, special to your organization, or special to this AIS, right? So yes, it is a collection of nouns or words that are used by the AIS project. This may include the name of the company, the contractor, the employees, or product name, or even the secret code name, right? A code name for a particular product, right? Like, or sometimes it may also include nouns or processes that are not known to people outside the project, right? And sometimes it enables the project participant to speak a language, quote unquote, right? So the project dictionary or the noun list is actually quite common for other type of project as well. It is particularly important for AIS project because the AIS project they usually involve in collection or process of various accounting data. And accounting data, as you know, that every company have a different product, different service. And when it comes to the journal entries and books, right, we have specialized account names for different accounts. And that's different from company to company, right? So from the get-go, the accounting data, right, already have some nouns that are not common to other industries. We may also have terms or formula that are unfamiliar to people outside of accounting, like for example, depreciation. If you want to track depreciation, in your AIS may have a specialized depreciation method, right? Depreciation schedule, right? And you may have to explain what is the depreciation schedule, depreciation method that you use. So the computer guys, they can take that depreciation formula and implement it into the AIS. But does ordinary computer guys understand depreciation? Depreciation? Probably no. No. Double declining method? No. Right? So you see, this is why the project dictionary for AIS may have special or more important than other projects, right? So it may contain like firm-specific account names, terms, and formula, and require special treatment in terms of the input and process and output. So developing the dictionary, we usually start with the stuff list. We look at the stuff list, okay, these are the stuff and then we make a determination. Okay, these are too sensitive. Let's move to the project dictionary and give it a description of it. Right? Staff list is usually a very good place to go, and it can be organized into categories such as list of people, list of product, list of processes, or list of accounts that are unique to the business or to the AIS. Okay, so the development of the now list, just like earlier we talked about the 4S, does not stop. It is an ongoing process. Because as your project move along, you start working with, let's say, software developer, you start working with your particular contractor, the more nouns or unfamiliar words start popping up here and there. And it is the project manager's responsibility to maintain the noun list. It's also that project manager's responsibility to see who is supposed to know what information, okay? And the use of noun list, we already talked about it. Okay? Allow the accounting function to quickly communicate the special accounts transaction process that are unfamiliar to people outside the accounting. It allows the specification of specific nouns, such as calculating formula or accounting ratio. And for larger projects, the noun list can also serve as the indices in the bag. Sometimes the large project, the documentations is like this thick, right? If you want to find special terms, you can look up the indices in the back. Oh, we talk about Gorilla Glasses in page 100, things like that, right? So there are many uses of this noun list, but now we understand the information in the noun list or project dictionary should be protected. Okay, so one thing people usually ask is that if the noun list or dictionary is so useful, can we have a verb list or other type of dictionary? The answer is yes, right? For example, software development, a list of a special software code library or functions, right? They kept in and some kind of dictionary is very common, right? But if you can probably imagine if these information are not protected well, so the project may be leaked, or some project manager may only share specific dictionary to the relevant parties only, right? So for list of people, yeah, you can see this, but this set of the dictionary is related to software development. You are not going to see this, right? So you can do that. Okay. Right. So the dictionary to your project, right? So you can start with the people. Who are the project manager, how to contact a particular person or supplier or contractor. You can also look at the processes. Is there any special accounting terms that are used in your project? Data, any special accounting input data, right? Does your project involve any type of pre-formulated calculations or events, special reporting needs for tax, compliance, or management review, right? Okay, these are in your dictionary. So that's it. That's what you have to do for the project dictionary. So I'm going to put you guys in your groups in the break room, and I will try to figure out what to do with the group only have 3 people in it, and to see if any group want to take it. So I'm going to put you guys into different break rooms. So you may take a break now and come back, join your break room. Okay, so you can start working with your teams. Let me try to get this and stop the